Alright, what is up everybody? This is Alex once again with another episode of the EOT News Flash. This is episode 57! Yeah! Blood Moon Rising. And we'll, you guys know. You guys know. Anyway, yeah, it's another week down here in lovely sunny Florida, even though the sun is setting surprisingly earlier than I'm used to. It's a weird phenomenon, and this is just a personal thing for me. Moving from Texas to Florida, which are in two separate time zones, obviously, because of how things are laid out geographically, the clocks move forward naturally for me 1 hour. But we experienced the daylight savings time on Sunday, therefore moving the time back. So what I'm experiencing now as 5:30 in the afternoon is actually what I feel 5:30 in the afternoon should actually feel like back in Texas time, but we're on Florida. It's really weird. It was a very bizarre way to wake up on Sunday morning and go, I don't actually know what time it is. But anyway, that's aside from my own personal, just obliviousness to how time works. Apparently, it's all wibbly wobbly and timey wimey. Stuff to talk about today. First big thing that happened over the weekend was Grand Prix Dallas, back in my hometown. Although, despite them calling it Grand Prix Dallas, it's actually held in Fort Worth. That's a fun fact for you people who've never been to Texas. Dallas is so big, it's more like the DFW area, but there's really no decent place to hold a convention in Dallas. I mean, there are, but just there's not any practical places as far as like parking and stuff like that goes. So if there's ever an SCG event or a Grand Prix, it's always at the Fort Worth Convention Center. It's right next to some sweet water gardens. There's plenty of places to eat down around there. It's a great place. I love going to that area, and it's a wonderful place to go play Magic. It's a great venue as well. So yeah, I unfortunately was not in attendance. I was here in Florida doing my Florida thing. I would have liked to have gone and played. Of course, I had my trusty Bant Eldrazi ready to go. Timing and just flights and things like that just didn't line up. So we'll get them next time and be in time ready for like San Antonio, which is next year in March, I think. Team GP for Modern. Yeah. All right, but anyway. Let's run down the top 8. This was the biggest Magic tournament in Texas ever. I believe it capped out right around 2,016 people, rather after the year that we're in. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the top 8 and see what the heck happened in Dallas, Fort Worth. Alright, so, boom! In 8th place, in the hands of Zach Voss, we had Titan Shift. Is this escape? Yeah, this is also a Escape Shift deck. So it's a Escape Shift deck, it's a Primeval Titan deck, it's a Through the Breach deck. There's a lot of different ways to configure this deck, but for the most part, what you're trying to do with this deck is assemble Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, and then drop lots of mountains to go with it. And once you have, I believe it is 6 extra mountains in play. I'm going to verify my own fact checking. Yes, 5 other mountains actually. Once you've assembled 5 other mountains in play with it, everyone past that will deal 3 damage to a target creature or player. It's a very, very powerful land, and when you're able to go get a couple of them with Primeval Titan and then attack with it, especially if you pass through the breach with it, you're doing a lot of damage with Valakuts very, very quickly. So it's kind of a combo deck in the sense that it tries to kill you all in one shot usually. Yeah, it's a cool deck. It's a deck I've considered building several times. It's not quite my style of deck, but I still think it is very, very powerful. And it's always great to kind of see these, non-hyper aggressive decks take down or make it to the top 8 of tournaments in Texas, which is typically, and if you've played in Texas in any time point in your life, you'll know that the major events in Texas on the competitive level tend to be filled with lots of aggressive decks. I don't know why. That's just kind of the way things are around there. But yeah, so here's 8th place, Zach Voss, Titan Shift, Escape Shift, Through the Breach, whatever you're going to call this, Red-Green Valakut. Cool deck. I like it a lot. In 7th place, we had... If it'll change. There we go. Infect, the absolute bane of the format, if you ask my humble opinion right now. If you played back during Scars of Mirrodin block, you were introduced to the Infect mechanic, which basically says that your opponent only has 10 life now because as soon as you have 10 poison counters, you lose the game. So what this deck is simply trying to do is drop either a Glistener Elf, a Noble Hierarch to go along with this, Glistener Elf, Blooded Agent, or an Inkmoth Nexus, attack with it, play some pump spells, and kill your opponent as early as turn 2 in some cases, which is really terrifying. One of the big cards that's kind of become part of this archetype has become Immense, with the Delve mechanic being so powerful with that card. It's a really efficient tool for just kill your opponent out of nowhere, just for +6/+6 after you've dropped some fetch lands. You maybe use some mutagenic growths and some Cataxian probes. This is one of the decks that really abuses Phyrexian mana in probably the best way possible, and that's also the worst way possible to abuse Phyrexian mana. But yeah, this is a deck that just, it needs something to be taken away from it to be a little bit more fair. People have said Become Immense needs to be banned. That's kind of my leaning on that, just because it is just an out of nowhere kill you. But yeah, the deck is incredibly powerful. It's surprisingly resilient. I love the fact that we're now playing Twisted Image in the main board to kill opposing hierarchs and spell skites, creatures out of affinity. It's just, it's such an all-in deck, and it's such a well-tuned deck. The only thing that's really kind of broken into its archetype has become Blossoming Defense from Kaladesh, the 1 mana +2/+2 and hexproof to a creature. That's really it. This deck doesn't change ever. You don't really have to adapt this to a metagame. You just roll up with your pump spells and your infect creatures and say, all right, can you beat me? Are you a turn fast enough to kill me? So yeah. But 7th place, Philip Napoli, Infect, because, you know, why not? In 6th place, Nicholas the Ambrose. Am I reading that right? Is it the exact same deck list? Yeah, it's Infect. Again, it's just what it is. It's more Infect. He is playing Botanical Sanctum, which is the new blue-green fast land out of Kaladesh, so it's kind of cool to see that card pop up. I don't know if one is perfect, one is better than the other. Just being able to fetch out, use a breeding pool to fetch out is better. Yeah, I don't know what the difference is here, but you know, worked out for him. 6th place, pretty cool. Moving on, in 5th place, good old Dredge. In the hands of Brian Brown-Dewin. This is a deck that has been slowly, and by slowly I mean horrifyingly, creeping up on the metagame as we've had more and more sets come out. When Golgari Grave Troll was unbanned at the tail end of last year, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was at the same time that Bitter Blossom was unbanned, everyone thought it was the return of Dredge. It didn't really do anything. There were some Dredge Vine decks that kind of, you know, were under the radar that weren't really doing anything, but then we had Prized Amalgam printed from Shadows of Innistrad block. We had Cathartic Reunion from Kaladesh, and that really gave this deck the shot in the arm that it needed. Insolent Neonate, another card that got printed, that just gave this deck a shot in the arm that it needs. And when you have the ability to just pitch cards basically for free and start dredging instead of your draw steps, if you don't know how this deck works, essentially what you're trying to do is assemble like an Alpha Strike with Necromeba and Prized Amalgam. And Necromeba, if it gets put into the graveyard, but not from play, like if it's milled over in this instance, it comes into play. And Prized Amalgam reads, if a creature had entered the battlefield from a graveyard, it comes into play at the end of the turn, tapped. The same way with Bloodghast. If a land enters the battlefield, it's landfall trigger and comes in, and it pulls it out of the graveyard. So you can amass a massive board state very, very quickly just by using things like Faithless Looting and Cathartic Reunion to dump your hand and start dredging and flipping these guys back into the graveyard. It's an incredibly resilient deck. Then we'll see the first place deck from this tournament really paid this deck some respect with a lot of tools in its main board. It's also trying to win through Conflagurate. This is a really this is a one-time printed spell. XX in a red. I don't even know what this card does actually. I'm having to read it off, but it's XX in a red for a sorcery that allows you to deal X damage divided as you choose among any number of creatures and or players. And you can flash it back by paying red and discarding X cards. So once you've already got it in the graveyard, you can just fire it off again, and it's a really powerful spell. This deck is very, very powerful, very resilient. Things like Vengeful Pharaoh on the sideboard, Knot of the Bone is really great. against the aggressive matches up. Collective Brutality is a new card that's been showing up in this deck a lot that I think is very, very well purposed in this deck, as well as other black mid-range decks like Abzan and Jund. It's even seeing some play in legacy decks like Blackwood Reanimator. It's a cool spell on the sideboard. I think it's very, very well positioned right now. This is a really powerful deck, and if your opponents aren't ready for it, you will run them over. Unfortunately, it does mulligan quite a bit, so there is some give and take when you're playing a deck like this. But if you like playing something really cool that plays a game unlike what your opponent will most typically be playing, this is the way to do it. No deck abuses the graveyard unlike Dredge does in any format. Vintage, Legacy, Modern. There are no decks like Dredge. Dredge is a monster. If you're not familiar with the Dredge mechanic, basically says you may, if there is a card with Dredge in your graveyard, as in Golgari Gravetroll, which has Dredge 6, it says instead of drawing a card, you may put this card back in your hand and put the top 6 cards of your library into your graveyard. That's how it fuels the Dredge mechanic. But yeah, this deck is incredibly powerful, and now that we have the tools, Prize Amalgam, Golgari Gravetroll back in the format, Insolent Neonate, Cathartic Reunion, this deck has become very, very good. And if you go to a tournament, bring your graveyard hate. You're going to need it. All right. In fourth place, a man after my own heart. Mr. Alex Meets is playing Jeskai Control. Whew. It's good to see this deck back. Notice I didn't say Jeskai Nahiri. Prior to now, sort of the Jeskai deck of choice was the Nahiri decks that were trying to land Nahiri the Harbinger and then go get Emrakul and just kill your opponent. Not Alex. He's doing things a little old school. We've got triple Supreme Verdict, double Supreme Sphinx's Revelation. Love that card. It's an X white blue. Draw X cards, gain X life, add instant speed. Love it. We have a Johnny Vengeant in the main board, Logic Knots, the Delve Counterspell. We've got Torrential Gearhulk, Cryptic Command. Can you imagine how good it must feel to Gearhulk a Cryptic Command? I mean, I know we kind of mused about this on the show when Justin was on a couple weeks ago when Kaladesh was still being previewed, but oh my god, that must feel good. Whew, I need a minute. Anyway, so yeah, this is just your typical hardened control deck, spot removal, card draw, Planeswalker singular, good creatures to close out the game, Celestial Colonnades to finish out the game. Very, very robust sideboard. I see Elspeth. We've got, is it Staticaster? Blessed Alliance has been another card I've really been impressed with in these white sideboards. This deck is just hard control, and I love seeing decks like this actually make the top 8 of major tournaments, because a lot of people thought that control was dead in Modern unless you were playing Jeskai Nahiri. You needed inevitability. And what Alex has here is inevitability. Sphinx's Revelation is a card that if it comes off the top and it's for any amount of mana, and if it's for any value, usually higher than 3, your opponent has lost to the game. It's especially because you haven't died at that point. You have 6 mana or more, and you're drawing that many cards. It's so powerful. Not having, think twice is in here too. Not having Ancestral Vision is a little odd, but I get that it doesn't work with Torrential Gearhulk, and I understand there's a reasoning for that. But it's kind of weird seeing a deck like this do well in Texas, especially with an aggressive metagame that you're usually expecting in the DFW area, but I do like the fact that he did so well with it. I love his counter magic package, his spot removal package. Only I think 2 Lightning Bolt's a little suspect. I'm sure he has his reasons though, but awesome seeing Jeskai Control top 8 a Modern tournament like this of this size. So hats off to Mr. Alex Mitas. Forgive me if I'm butchering your name, but yeah. Torrential Gearhulk in Modern. Sweet. All right. Moving on, in third place, it's mislabeled as Dredge, but this is Infect. Again, I'm not going to go over this deck again. One thing of note here is that he's playing Rancors, which is kind of cool. Rancor, of course, if it would go to the graveyard after falling off a creature, like if you kill the creature the Rancor is equipped to or enchanted on, it will go back to your hand. So that's kind of neat. It has a neat interaction with Inkmoth Nexus if you want to think about it like that. But other than that, there's nothing really to talk about here other than it's just more Infect. Infect was, I don't have the number in front of me unfortunately, but it was the most represented deck at the tournament. And that's saying something. So, there you go. More Infect. And in second place, if you thought Alex was, Mr. Metis, was after me and my heart, Mr. Corey Burkhardt. Oh, man. That's not white spells in this deck. He's got black. Grixis Control. If you followed the SCG circuit for a while, probably towards the beginning of this year, before Shadows over Innistrad actually came out. Actually, it might have been late last year. The time's a little bit fuzzy on my mind right now. But if you were following the SCG circuit, you saw a lot of Corey playing a lot of Grixis Control. And this was prior to the printing of Nahiri the Harbinger. This is a much more removal-based deck than what we saw in the hands of Alex Midas. It's much more focused on the graveyard, and we see that we have the Forethought Scours. We have Tassiger here, who really wants to abuse the graveyard, come down very, very quickly, as early as turn 2 in some cases, if you're able to chain together enough spells and your fetch lands. We've got Quadruple Cryptic Command. That is insane for a deck like this, who is playing a relatively light amount of mana, but when it's good, it's good. We've got Counter Squall in the main board too. I love Counter Squall. A blue and a black, target non-creature spell, target opponent loses 2 life. Man, what a killer spell right there. But yeah, this is your typical Grixis Control deck. We've got the Terminates, Lightning Bolts, Kolaghan's Command. We see Snapcaster Mage, of course. The full 4 Ancestral Vision. I saw him play, I believe it was playing into the top, or playing for top 8. He had already locked up his spot, if I'm not mistaken. He went undefeated during the Swiss rounds, which is amazing, up until he drew with Brian Brown-Duin into top 8 for seeding purposes, of course. But he played a game against Jund in one of the earlier rounds where he had double Ancestral Vision in his hand, was able to suspend the first one on his next turn, even after he got Inquisitioned, hit the second one, and a few turns later drew the third one, and it just put him out of contention. The one thing that Control decks really had a hard time with these mid-range decks like Abzan and Jund is that they couldn't keep up their card quantity or card quality for that matter, because these decks were just playing Thoughtseizes and Inquisition of Kozilek to tear their hand apart and leave them with nothing once they resolve their Tarmogoyf for their Liliana of the Veil. Ancestral Vision really pulls this deck to the point where it can fight back, because what these Jund decks, these black style mid-range rock decks, black-green decks that is, are trying to do is just out-attrition you. But they don't have a good card advantage engine. So if they're trading off their resources to take your hand apart, and then your Ancestral Vision comes off suspend and you draw those 3 cards, plus the one for your turn, you're right back in the game. Or you put the game completely out of reach for your opponent. You have so many cards in your hand. So I love Grixis Control for that reason. It's also main decking Kolaghan's Command, which I think is a very powerful card in the format just in general. It's so versatile in its utility. We see a main deck Engineered Explosives, which I think is a great sideboard card, but also a great main board card in certain metagames. If you can kind of get a read on it, if you expect a lot of aggressive decks like Zoo or Infect or Affinity, you can main deck this card with a pretty good assurance that it's going to have some sweet targets for it and really put your opponents in some difficult spots. His sideboard's fantastic. We have Sun Droplet, more Engineered Explosives. Is it Staticaster? Man, oh, that is a Staticaster. But yeah, I love Grixis Control. Lots of people online were saying, this deck can't actually win a game. I think they need to reevaluate that statement. And of course, in first place, and I'm having a hard time even saying this, we have Skred Red. If you don't know what this deck is, I don't blame you, because it is literally on the fringes of the fringe decks. Its namesake comes from a 1-card Skred, which is a 1-mana red instant. Let's see if I can get the picture to maybe You can see the top of it right there, though. It's a 1 mana instant, and it deals damage to target creature equal to the number of snow permanents you control. If you've not been playing Magic for, let's say it's like 10 years plus, you probably don't know that snow permanents exist. But if you notice his mana base, 20 snow-covered mountains. Back during Cold Snap and Ice Age, Wizards introduced this thing called Snowlands and Snow Permanents. And they basically just had a little icon that indicated they were a snow something. That's literally all it is. Yeah, there's really not much to it else than that. I don't know. Mechanically, it tied into the theme of the block in the sets. But other than that, there has literally no bearing on anything. You can play snow-covered basics, I'm pretty sure, in your standard decks too, because they're just basic lands. Don't quote me on that, but I think that is correct. But yeah, this deck is just a a who's who of past standard all-stars. Stormbreath Dragon, the 5-mana 4/4 flying with haste and protection from white and monstrosity. What is the most played removal spell in the format right now, guys? Other than Bolt and Terminate? Yeah, it's Path to Exile. You can't kill this thing half the time. We've got Magma Jet showing up from Theros block. We all love playing Magma Jet. Scrying is great. On burn spells, even better. We have Pia and Kira Nalar, who have become modern staples in these Kiki Court decks, but were everywhere during Origin Standard. We've got Batterskull, the most busted equipment ever printed, and they put it in the same format with Stoneforge Mystic, which ended up leading it banned. We have Blood Moons. Oh, Blood Moon. Moving past that, Chandra, Torch of Defiance. She's not seeing play in Standard, but she's everywhere in Modern, in these Jund decks, in these Skred decks. She's even seeing play in Legacy. That's kind of cool, isn't it? Koth of the Hammer. If you remember the big red decks from the Scars of Mirrodin era Standard, you will remember Koth being a huge force in this deck. 4 mana, 2 and 2 red. Its +1 ability allows you to untap a mountain, or actually it does, let me get this right. Not Chandra, I mean Koth. I wish I could have enough room to show you guys the whole card, but my setup is being a little weird right now. +1 untaps a mountain. It becomes a 4/4 red elemental creature until the end of turn. It's still a land. -2, add 1 red mana to your pool for each mountain you control. -5, you get an emblem with mountains you have. Tap, this land deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and it ultimates so quick. It starts at 3, 2 turns later you are firing off that emblem. This guy is scary powerful. He's just, it is so scary what this card is capable of doing in this deck specifically. You can't play Koth in any other deck really, which is fine. I like planeswalkers that have a very niche application, kind of like Tezzeret, Agent of Bolus. But yeah, also we have Mind Stone, Relic of Progenitus. When I mentioned that he came ready for the Dredge matchup, which maybe is a bad matchup for him, I don't know. Relic of Progenitus puts that in a really awkward position to be playing Dredge. 3 Anger of the Gods as his sweeper of choice. Again, great against Dredge. There's a card in this list, and maybe you're looking at it right now, that kind of sticks out as odd, and it's Eternal Scourge. You remember this one from Shadows over Innistrad block. 3 mana, 3/3, I believe. Let me double check that. I wish I could show you guys the cards completely, but yeah, I think it's being weird. Yeah, 3 mana, 3/3, Eldrazi Horror. You may cast it from exile. That's your key line right there. And of course, when it becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you exile it. So, here's your setup. Let's roll back to the semifinals where he's playing against Jeskai Control, which was a really sloppy game, but I'm not going to get into that. You know, it's a long tournament. Things happen to people. You know, they get a little tired, I can imagine. What is a Jeskai player or any control or removal-based deck supposed to do against this thing? I lightning bolted. Okay, it's exiled. Okay, your turn. Untap, draw, 3 mana, cast this from exile. Insane. And when he's got his own Anger of the Gods, I'll just wipe my board. Oh, it's an exile. I'll just untap, draw, cast it from exile. Relic of Progenitus. You have nothing in your graveyard. I'll target myself with Relic. Exile card from my graveyard. Exile Eternal Scourge. Oh, my turn. Untap, draw, cast again from my graveyard. This thing is a nightmare to play against for any control deck, and I have absolutely no idea what to do against this card. again, I don't know if this is going to be adopted into other decks that are able to play Relic of Progenitus in the main board. I have no idea. People were, at the tournament were saying, "Oh, you broke the format," and he wasn't so sure about that. I'm not convinced either. But this is just a very, very all-in deck. Of course, the Blood Moons are there to take advantage of the 3-color mana bases that are so prevalent in Modern. If you can't cast your spells, you're not playing a game. And that's kind of what happened in the finals. He managed to lock out Corey Burkhart pretty quickly with a Blood Moon, and that was just the end of it. Goblin Arrival Master in the sideboard. God. These are cards that we used to be really freaked out about in Standard, and now they're showing up in Modern. Weird. So yeah, that's the GP Dallas top 8. Again, I had a bunch of friends who were there. Shout out to all my friends who were down there. James, Jared, Sean, Ivan, who came very close to top 8ing this thing. He went 11-4, if I'm not mistaken, through the entire day. Jason had a great day 2 undefeated run, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, everybody that was down there that I awesome job playing, guys. I will be there for the next one. I promise you that. So yeah, that's GP Dallas in a nutshell. Your Blood Moon has risen. So yeah, that's part 1 of tonight's episode. Part 2 is gonna be a little more off the cuff, even though I've been planning this since Tuesday night. If you've listened to this show at all for any amount of time, you've probably noticed that we don't cover a lot of controversial topics on the show, and I'm going to adhere to that, except in this one instance. So, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about my own personal leanings or anything like that. This is an appeal to the community at large. This is all this is. So don't take this as a political statement from me in any which way. This is just a plea to the community. So I'm sure as a lot of you have known, Tuesday night we had our election for President of the United States. We now have a new president, Donald Trump, Mr. President-elect. Your feelings about him or his opponent, Hillary Clinton, aside, that does not matter right now. That does not matter. What does matter is what we're going to do moving forward. And if you've been on social media in any amount of time since Tuesday night, you have no doubt probably seen a lot of very negative things, and that's unfortunate. But that's the reality that we live in. So basically, what I'm wanting from us as a community is to be better than that. This is my appeal to the community at large, the Magic community at large. I want us to be better. Whenever I walk into a game shop, I always feel welcome. My own standing as a white guy in America, notwithstanding, but I always feel welcome. I've met a lot of different people playing Magic, of all kinds of minorities, of all sexual orientations. And the one that brings us together is this card game, this Magic the Gathering card game, which is, it's funny that it's a unifying force that it is. And I want us as a community to continue to be as good as we have been. And I also want us to strive to be better, even though the spotlight isn't on us, like other communities are. I can't think of a community that has its spotlight put on itself right now. But yeah, if the spotlight ever turns to us, or if anybody ever says, "Oh, hey, what do you do on your weekends?" "Oh, I go and play Magic." You tell them, and they say, "Oh, I thought that was a game for nerdy people." Well, it is. They're right. But you walk into, I can imagine the scene that was at Grand Prix Dallas. Can you imagine all the different kinds of people that were there? White people, African Americans, Hispanics, Chinese, everybody was there because we were all there to play Magic, and nobody thought ill, or at least I hope that nobody thought ill of anybody else just because of their race or their sexual orientation or how they dressed. None of that happened. So, and that's what I'm looking for here. we have such great ambassadors within the game who are, what you would consider minorities. Aaron Campbell comes to mind of Magic Mike's and the girlfriend bracket fame. She's a great ambassador for Magic from the trans community, and she is a wonderful person. I don't know her personally, but listening to her speak on her podcast, I can tell she is very impassioned about the things that she believes in when it comes to equality within Magic, and that's what we need to have going forward. Be accepting of all the people that come across from that you sit across from at the table when you're playing Magic. So whenever anybody turns the spotlight on us and they go, "Hey, look at the guys and the girls and everybody else playing Magic. Look at how unified they are. Let's be that, and let's show people that we're better than that, and we have this game that brings us together. And the game is great, but right now the game isn't what matters. It's the fact that we're coming together as a community and we are being great together, and that's what I want to have going forward. And that's all I'm going to say about this whole situation. Let's be great together and show the world what we as a community are made of. Let's do that. I'm going to do that. I'd like you to do that too. Wherever you're listening from or watching from, I know I have fans in as far reaching as Germany and Africa, all across the country. Wherever you are, wherever you sit down to play Magic, be great. Be a good person. That's what I want to say tonight. Be a good person. When no matter where you are, no matter who you're playing, accept them, be nice to them, and let's show the world that we can be better, and that we are better, and that we can be great as a community. That's my bit tonight. So, I want to say a big thank you to everybody who's been watching down here. I've been getting lots and lots of messages via Twitter and Facebook. You guys are using my Gmail account. I'm a little hurt by that, but it's okay. It's whatever. Lots of great comments, lots of great feedback. The show is certainly still finding its bearings down here in Florida. It's currently a one-man operation. I'm hoping to get back to the old way of having, people behind me. So we're getting to that. So I appreciate everybody who has, been, still listening. Awesome. Great. Shout out to my old team, Sean, James, Ivan, all you guys. Man, miss you guys. Do remember to check us out on Facebook at the EOT Newsflash. Check us out over on YouTube. I've been doing all of the videos, all the podcasts as video first, and then uploading them as audio later. So there's multiple ways to listen to them. Check us out on YouTube. I've got deck techs up there, tournament reports, all kinds of cool stuff. Check us out every week on MTGcast. Reach out to me on Twitter, EOT Newsflash at Gmail, EOTNewsflash@gmail.com. But yeah, big thanks for listening, guys. And I do want to stress this point one more time. Just be great, and let's show people that we can be great and that we are great. So thanks for listening, guys. You have a great night.